Please welcome the former U.S. Senator from Tennessee, Bob Corker, and Times' Massimo Calabresi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How you doing, man?
Welcome, everyone. As you know, the theme of the summit today is how influential people can come together and make change across divides. So we're very fortunate to have with us here Senator Bob Corker, who during his 12 years in Congress was at the center of a number of consequential and controversial cross-aisle battles, including the auto bailout, the Iran deal, healthcare reform, immigration. So we're going to talk about some of that today. But now with 4 months behind you since you left Washington, I think the first question I'd like to ask is, does it look as bad from the outside as it does on the ground? Is Washington really as broken as it appears to be? And has it ever been this bad?
Well, to all due respect to my friends who do cable television, I have not seen 1 second of cable television since I left the Senate. And I think that people do get an unusual, I read a lot of publications every morning. But from the standpoint of how people interact with each other, it's nothing like you see on television or read about. People actually have friendships. They go to dinner with each other. They talk with each other on the Senate floor about trying to solve problems. So the answer is no. As far as between the administration and Congress, it's probably pretty much the way you see it.
So who's to blame for that? Obviously, a lot of the partisanship is coming from the White House, but you also interacted at a very high level, regular level with the leadership in Congress. What's the source and who's to blame?
So I served with 3 presidents, President Bush, President Obama, President Trump, each of whom were very, very different. And what I saw was that in our country, the president, whoever's president, totally changes the tone of what is happening in Washington. It just dwarfs the most senior senator or anyone else. It totally dwarfs it. Just the megaphone that they have, the tone they set is so powerful. Thus far, it's my belief that our current president, typically to unite people, you have to wish to do so. And I think that currently the president has not found that to his benefit or to his liking or to who he is or to his political outcomes in a positive way. And therefore, he purposely seeks to divide. Now, that could change. The most important thing to him is his political standing more than anything else in the world. And so that could change. I also believe that elected officials are elected to solve problems, not to create them. And I think currently the administration on many of the hot button issues that have an effect, especially on the base voters on both sides of the aisle, has chosen to pursue a course of action not to solve problems, in many cases to create problems like you're seeing right now in immigration.
Well, it's interesting. You had a particularly close view of this, having spoken about senior administration positions with the president at the beginning of his time as a politician, and then obviously having a rocky relationship with him thereafter. But that does mirror somewhat the relationship that the party more broadly has had with Trump. Why is it that the Republican Party has had such a challenging time in sticking to the values, conservative fiscal, social values that were central to its identity in the era of Trump?
If you looked at the Republican platform, from the time I was there, January 7th through, January of 2007 until, let's say, January of 2017, we were oriented towards trade, fair trade, but trade. We were oriented towards things like dealing with our fiscal issues in an appropriate way. there were 4 or 5 things that we stood on. We felt like America was a force for good in the world, and that the world was a better place with America being involved as a moral leader also. And so that went by the wayside in large measure. I would say that, look, it gets down to one thing. This president has an unusually visceral contact with the Republican base as it's made up today. And the same thing could very well happen on the Democratic side if someone's elected. That's in some ways where the electorate is today, where it's become very tribal in nature. But many U.S. senators I know better. I mean, we go to dinner and talk, and they are good people that want to do good things for our country. At the same time, they'd like to serve again in the United States Senate. And with the president having the relationship that he has with the voting base, it obviously has not caused some of the best things to come out
So is that why you didn't seek re-election, because of the divisions with Trump?
No, I actually, those divisions didn't become apparent so visibly to the public until after I decided not to leave. To leave. I actually told people when I ran, and Bill Frist before me, who was majority leader, said he was going to serve for 2 terms and was going to leave. He did as majority leader. Remember, when I was recruited by him and Lamar Alexander to run for this seat, being mayor of our city of Chattanooga, I said the same thing. And so, what happens in the Senate, it's an amazing place, because the longer you stay, the more powerful you become. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. I had 2 years left on that. We had 2 term limits. I was going to be chairman of banking. And so there's a draw to stay. But I just felt like at the end of the day, I said I would serve 2 terms. And it was the right thing to do. It was time to move on to another phase of life and live life a little differently. But we became especially in October, I announced September 26th I was not going to run. In October, we especially became very publicly disenchanted with each other. I knew what was happening with Tillerson. I had breakfast with him every 2 weeks. I talked with him often on the phone. Former Secretary of State. Mattis was somebody I just truly loved. For young people who are looking for someone who's a great public servant to emulate in some ways, General Mattis is one of those. And I knew what was happening, if you will, and I began to speak out more and more and more and more.
But the trajectory you're describing is one of an increasing dominance of the Republican Party by Trump, not a sort of a consolidation of the traditional values in hiding, as it were. It makes it sound as if the Republican Party is fundamentally going to be something different after Trump, one way or the other.
Well, I don't know, but I will say this. So we've always been out there on entitlement reform, right? I've offered, I don't know how many suggestions. We saw today that Social Security is going to be, eating into its core, if you will, in 2020. We could easily solve that. With 3 of us could go in a room. It's so simple, and people on both sides of the aisle would be happy with the solution if we would just do it. One of the things that has affected the Republican Party, if you think about where the base is today, where we used to be strident always, talking about Medicare, Social Security, saving our nation from just huge indebtedness, over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. If you look at the Republican base today, I say this with love, but there are a lot of older white people in the Republican base.
Like us.
Like me, not you. You're younger. But if you think about that, and you think about the race that took place in 2016 with Secretary Clinton and President Trump, not one word was spoken. Not one word was spoken about an issue that, to our young people who are going to be paying this off, is one of the most severe issues our nation faces. And a big part of it is the Democratic side, generally speaking, no offense to Democrats, doesn't like to talk about that issue. And now if you think about where the Republican base is, maybe it feels it cannot talk about that issue, and it doesn't bode well to solving some of the bigger problems.
Do you think Trump will be meaningfully primaried this election cycle?
I think what philosophically, you could look at it and say that it would be a good thing for our country should that occur from the standpoint of issues. And that if you had a real primary where you had someone that was really being listened to and of substance, these things that we were talking about, and I could go through a list of them, they would actually be debated in a real way. And that would be a good thing for our country. On the other hand, if you know it's a Don Quixote kind of expedition where, you know, you're going to get crushed, first of all, no one's going to listen to the debate if that's the case, right? Because people look at it as... So at this point, it's hard to see that that is an effective route.
Sounds as if you've given it some thought. Are you considering getting into politics again? I
have today, as we speak, at 1:16 Eastern Time, I have no thoughts currently about
well, it's quite
future
an open-ended
Look, I
answer.
spent, you know, a big part of my life as a business person. I'm returning to that and trying to, you know, figure out what that next passion in life is. I tell my daughters all the time, please follow your passions in life. I've had the great fortune of being able to do so. Public service has been a big part of that, and I'm so thankful to have been able to serve. But as far as what is next, I truly don't know. I'm trying to discern that. This is my first public event since having left office. I'm doing so over the next 2 weeks in multiple places. And you know, I just met the new owner of Time Magazine in the back, and I'm excited for the employees at Time. I'm excited for those who are devotees as it relates to reading Time. And I'm excited for our country, actually, that a spark of life is being given to a credible journalistic endeavor. So,
well, thank you for that. But it sounds like you're considering throwing your hat into the ring. Sorry to get back to the business at hand.
So these guys get paid by getting people to make news. I can assure you that at 117 now, nothing's changed. No, I'm not, please, media folks, I'm not. Today I have no idea what I'm going to be doing next month.
Terrific. Well, I'd love to open it up. We're close to the end, but I'd love to open it up for one question from the audience. Is there anyone out there who would like to ask a question of Senator Corker? Right here, yep. And please identify yourself if you could.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going on with the Iran deal, specifically President's waivers for oil, and what are your thoughts on the steps the administration is taking the Iran deal?
Yeah.
What can we do for it to get Iran back to the table and ensure that there's a peaceful resolution?
Yeah. So,
Senator Corker played a central role in the battles over the formation of the Iran deal, so I have some knowledge about it.
So, you know, we had I led the creation of a mechanism for Congress to be able to weigh in because it was going to be done strictly by executive fiat at the United Nations, and ended up voting against the Iran deal after examining it closely. When the administration came in, I laid out a three-part way of potentially saving it, knowing what the president had said during the campaign, and worked with Tillerson and H.R. McMaster to that end. The key component was to do away with the sunset provision, which after 10 years, people who authored this would take offense, but it's just true. After 10 years, Iran was off and running. I mean, they were able to just have at building a nuclear weapon. I'm sorry, but it's true. And so I think that, you know, France would have been open to that. We had to do so with our you know, associates in the West. Angela Merkel was dead against it. At the end of the day, it was not achievable. I would have liked to have seen a way for us as a world leader, as the world leader, to figure out a way to make it better. At the end of the day, I think what they've done is probably the right thing under the circumstances, which will get boos from this audience. And I think that after having 6 months of extensions with important allies of ours, I think it is time to figure out a way to wean off, and I think it's the only way to get them to the table. So that, I know that's not an answer that many people in this room respect. I don't think, I've met with Zarif, their foreign minister. I think unless there's a significant pain, it's going to be very difficult to get them back to the table. And they are, let me just tell you, I know that one of the great privileges of being chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee is seeing all the intelligence relative to what they do. You know, I'd like to see that we could have a world where you could deal with people like them and kumbaya and solve problems, but they are a major exporter of violence, of terrorism, and I hope that we can cause them to become a part of the normal world community at some point.
Well, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We're going off this way, Senator?
Oh, okay.